was 17 years old and I just found out I was pregnant. I think the fear was that I had to tell my parents and then not be able to go to school, which was scary. And then I think it's the overwhelming thing that you have another human being other than yourself to look after.
Mine's pretty much the same, but I was 15 when I found out. My parents always said no matter what you go through and stuff, you still gotta, no matter what you go to school, you're gonna finish no matter what. So that was pretty overwhelming because I was scared, like, you know, I can't do it with a baby. It was so scary.
Yeah, kind of excited, a bit uneasy, like feeling a bit nervous and how I was going to support my family as a man that didn't have a trade, you know, didn't have a stable full-time job at the time. But at the same time, like, I was very excited, you know, to become a father and becoming like mature and just becoming a man.
I was 18 and I was running a business for my parents. I was in Toowoomba. I'd lived quite a sheltered life, so when I was away from home, I was having quite a partying lifestyle, which was fun at the time, but I quickly found myself pregnant. I was brought up Italian, very strict. I told my mum that I was pregnant very soon after I found out, thinking that they would be supportive of me. And I was quite shocked when Mum replied that do whatever you need to do to fix it. I didn't know what she meant by that at the time, so I went to the doctor to find out what she meant by that, quite ignorantly. And the GP, her reply was that was an abortion. So very easily I got a referral from the GP and was booked in for my abortion pretty much straight away.
I was an entertainer in Vietnam during the war. As a result from that, I'd met a lot of Americans, so I decided at the very tender young age of 19 to venture to the United States to join a show in Florida. It was basically a musical. So I went to Florida with a girlfriend, and we, spent some time down there, and I started rehearsals with this show, only to find out that I was pregnant. So, my surprise pregnancy put an end to that part of my career temporarily. That's when I then had to make a decision. There were options. In fact, I talk about 3 options. 1 was an abortion. 2 was keep the baby and try to raise the child myself as a single mom, which was unheard of in those days. And the 3rd option was basically to give my son up for adoption. And I chose that option.
Well, when my husband and I found out we were pregnant, it really was pretty bad timing for us. I mean, we'd just moved interstate for my husband to study a pretty lengthy course. I was working, I was also doing some postgraduate study. We were about to purchase our first home. In the mix of all of that, I started having some pretty significant health issues. Out of concern for that, my doctor at the time said, you're going to have a termination because you'll never be able to cope. However, we decided to continue with the pregnancy.
Human life begins at conception when the sperm fertilises the egg. This is a scientific fact. From the moment of conception, this new human being is a distinct and separate individual, genetically different from his or her mother.
When we found out we were pregnant, I had more of a party sort of outgoing lifestyle. I didn't really care much for any consequences of my actions. But now, sort of brought things back into perspective for me as a family person. I still go out every now and then, don't get me wrong, but I'm more focused on my partner and my baby than I was on just myself and run amok as a young person, like most young people do. So,
Because initially when I found out I was pregnant, I was shocked because it was one of those things that my dad said to me, if you ever get pregnant, we'll disown you. But very quickly I became excited because the few friends that I did tell were excited for me as well. I guess I didn't have time to process the consequences of what being pregnant meant at 18. I didn't think there was a choice. I thought I'd be having my baby, and ignorantly I didn't know that abortion was a choice.
It all started with my first relationship. Within a few months, the girlfriend was pregnant and she aborted that child. The relationship continued for a number of years, and unbeknownst to me, she had another one that I presume I was the father of. I've fathered, in theory, I've fathered 7 children, and I only have 2, and I look in the eyes of the 2 that are there, and I often see the ones that aren't.
Well, it was pretty scary for me because I got told that I had to have a cesarean because she was breech, and so that was booked. And then I was in the midwifery group practice, and they helped me a lot. They give you all these sheets of paper and explain what the poo's gonna look like, and explain when they're crying, do they need birthing, everything. That it was so good, emotionally, and also at my school there's a creche, and we do activities, and they're just scrapbooking of your little ultrasounds and stuff like that. It was just, it warmed you up to it, so you were prepared and happy about it. It made you feel welcome to the mother world, sort of thing.
At first, your general thing is you're shocked. You're like, what am I going to do? It's doable with the right support.
My husband and I decided to go ahead with the pregnancy anyway, because the way we were thinking was that this was a gift. We made sure we went to every possible class that we could go to before the birth to prepare ourselves. I went to all my appointments, and the obstetrician whose care I was under was just checking me regularly and make sure everything was okay. And even though the pregnancy and the birth especially were very difficult, we had fantastic help through the hospital with the nurses and the doctor who was looking after us. A week after discharge, they sent a midwife to our home to make sure everything was okay. And we also got in touch with an organisation who did an assessment within our home and matched us up with a volunteer who came along and spent time with us each week for an hour or 2, just to help us through in those first 3 months. And we had the help there. It was there. Even though our family and our friends were all interstate, we weren't alone.
The baby's heart begins to beat around 3 weeks from conception. Brainwaves can be detected at 6 weeks from conception. By 7 weeks, the baby's ears may already resemble a family pattern. At 8 weeks from conception, every organ is present, and the baby looks like a smaller scale version of himself at birth. In week 12, the baby's behaviour shows distinct individuality, with the developing child moving fingers and toes, kicking legs, turning the head and opening the mouth. By 4 months, unique fingerprints, palm prints and footprints are present.
I look so much like my daughter when I was little that it sort of made you realise that she's a bit of you. You just look at her and you think, I created this little human being that looks exactly like me.
Yeah, so Zoe started walking, and it's just a shock to you. They're crawling for so long, then they just get up and start running. It's wow, that's a part of me going now. Look at that. It's so cool. It makes me cry.
I was totally fearful, so that made my only choice was to have an abortion. And not knowing there were any, not being aware of support services, I just didn't have the resources, not knowing that there was a pregnancy centres available that I could go and speak to for support, not knowing about Centrelink, not knowing that there was single parent allowances. I would have been able to manage. Because I did have the friends that were excited to help with outside networks and a few friends that could have helped. I would have managed, and I would have been able to have that baby with me today.
There are two ways for an abortionist to perform an early abortion: medical or surgical. In a surgical abortion, a light sedation or a general anaesthetic is used. They place the instruments through the cervix and into the uterus. Using the instruments, the baby's body is scraped out or sucked out. The second way is to use a combination of medications which changes the functioning of the uterus. The medications cause the cervix to enlarge, the uterus to contract, and the baby to be delivered. This can take days to occur.
Everyone says bringing up a baby is hard. It is hard in a way, but at the same time, it's very nice to come home and have your baby recognise you as the father of your child, and be ecstatic to see you and the look on their face when you come home from work. At the same time, they're growing as a little baby, and you get to see them crawl, you get to see them laugh, grow teeth, start walking, hurt themselves, and you pick them up, give them a big cuddle, and tell them it's all right. So, yeah, it's nice being a father. I like it.
Basically, what happened then is I moved on with my life, and I did get through it, and I did, just keep going, but I never forgot that child. I never forgot that little boy. So years went by, and all of a sudden, he was in my life again. And that was through a private investigator that my son, after a 10-year search, had located in Melbourne. And that very same day, he contacted me telling me that my birth son was looking for me. It was disbelief at first, but it turned out to be true. And 2 days later, my son Stephen and I were on the phone, talking to each other, exchanging photos over the internet, and so much more. It was just incredible. And we emailed and talked on Skype for a couple of weeks, and then he informed me he was coming out to Australia to meet me.
Even though we had to give up the purchase of our first home, I had to give up my job, we had to put up with a few years of poverty than we were expecting. We have absolutely no regrets, because when we look at our daughter today, she is just our life. She is just so beautiful.
The effect on a man, for me anyway, manifested itself when my son was born. And then you realize what you've lost. And as your children grow, and as the joy of having another child and having a family, there's a real sadness about the children that aren't there and will never be there. And it doesn't go away. You cannot wipe this away. I would suggest that most people would, it sort of sounds like a good idea at the time, but people just are not aware of the longer term effects and the depression that it can cause, the anger that it causes, and the sense of loss. They're all wound up into a tight ball.
There is considerable evidence now showing the serious physical and psychological effects of abortion on women, and as a consequence, their partners and families. While most women feel short-term relief, this can be followed by feelings of grief, loneliness, doubt, shame, regret. The full psychological effects of abortion can be delayed and can take 10, 20, or even 30 years to surface.
For me, I just really missed my baby. I missed not having the choice. I felt like I wasn't given I felt like I wasn't given a voice. I felt like I didn't have a say. Oh, sorry. As to whether he was born or not, I felt like that was taken out of my hands.
I think if I had had a termination, I wouldn't be where I am today, but I wouldn't have experienced life and things in life the way I have, especially with you get to have someone else there to show things in life. But if I had chose to terminate, I don't think my life would have been so fulfilling.
When Stephen and I first started talking and we were chatting on the phone, we used to talk all the time, one of his first words to me in our first conversation was, "Thank you for having me." I was simply blown away. I could not believe it. I just said, "Stephen, there was no other choice for me," because I knew exactly what he was referring to. So he was so grateful to me in a way, even though I wasn't there for him all those years, that I had given him life.